The Great Depression and how the world plunged into the deepest crisis of the 20th century. Watch. It's going to be interesting.
It's hard to imagine today that the world's largest economy could collapse in just a matter of days. But in the late 1920s, the United States lived as if a crisis was simply impossible. And that very confidence became the beginning of a catastrophe. So what actually happened? Hi everyone. In this episode, we'll break down how the Great Depression began, why no one recognized the danger ahead of time, how its consequences reshaped the lives of millions and even pushed the world closer to World War II. The Roaring Twenties, a decade when growth felt endless. The late 1920s in the United States are often called the Roaring Twenties. It was a time of explosive economic growth. Production was so fast that factories could barely keep up with demand. Ford's assembly lines were rolling out a new car roughly every 10 seconds, an unprecedented achievement in industrial efficiency. By the end of the decade, there was one car for every 4 Americans. It was a staggering figure. The country was rapidly turning into a true consumer society. And 2/3 of all cars were bought on credit, a new practice that allowed millions to spend money they didn't actually have. Over that decade, U.S. GDP grew by about 40% and industrial output by 65%. Rising wages, easy loans, and a near-religious belief in endless prosperity created the illusion that America had entered an age where crises simply couldn't happen. And the worst part? This belief was shared not just by ordinary people, but by politicians and economists as well. No one suspected that just a few years later, the country would fall into a hole so deep that it would take nearly a decade to climb out of. The stock market crash, a symbol, not the root cause. On October 24, 1929, the New York Stock Exchange began to shake. Panic selling pushed the market down by 11%. But the true catastrophe came on October 29th, the infamous Black Tuesday. 16 million shares were traded in a single day. Losses reached billions. The Dow Jones plunged almost 25%. This day is officially considered the start of the Great Depression. But today, historians agree. The stock market crash wasn't the cause, it was merely the spark. The system had been unstable for a long time.
Why the economy collapsed: overproduction, credit, and speculation. By the end of the 1920s, the American economy was overheated. The main factors were: 1. Overproduction. Factories produced far more goods than consumers could buy. Incomes weren't rising as fast as industrial output. Warehouses filled up, demand weakened, and the warning signs were ignored. 2. A massive credit bubble. Americans were taking out loans for everything: houses, cars, even stocks. Buying stocks on margin meant gambling with borrowed money, assuming prices would only rise. Banks and brokers encouraged it. 3. Fraudulent schemes. Fraudulent operations similar to Ponzi schemes were widespread. Even though Charles Ponzi himself acted a decade earlier, the culture of easy profit was still alive and fueling speculation. 4. Lack of regulation. No deposit insurance, almost no banking oversight, no control over market activity, the perfect recipe for disaster. The market was built on trust, and once trust evaporated, everything collapsed with it. Bank panic, when people unintentionally destroyed the system. After the crash, Americans rushed to withdraw their savings, but banks couldn't return the money. Much of it was locked in loans, stocks, and risky investments. One of the most symbolic failures was the collapse of the private United States Bank, which many mistakenly thought was part of the federal system because of its name. Crowds withdrawing deposits triggered chain reactions, leading to regional bank failures and eventually a nationwide banking panic. Within 3 years, about 1/3 of all U.S. banks disappeared. The money supply shrank by 1/3. Lending stopped. The economy froze.
A social disaster. Food, housing, work, everything vanished. Unemployment was around 2% in 1929. 4 years later, it hit 25%. Every fourth family lost its income. People who had owned cars, appliances, and dined in restaurants suddenly found themselves standing in soup lines. Homes purchased on installment were repossessed by banks. Families moved into tents under bridges. These makeshift camps became known as Hoovervilles, mocking President Hoover. Police and private guards broke up hunger marches, like the infamous clash at Ford's plants in Detroit, where workers were killed. An age of despair arrived. People traveled across the country searching for work, labored for food, grew vegetables, and preserved everything they could. Why it happened? President Hoover's mistakes. President Hoover had once saved millions from starvation in the Russian famine of 1921. But during the crisis, he was trapped by his own beliefs. The government should not provide direct aid. He raised taxes, increased tariffs, restricted imports, but refused to support families, stimulate demand, or offer benefits. It was political suicide. The nation turned against him. How Franklin Roosevelt changed America? When Franklin Roosevelt took office in 1932, he moved quickly and decisively. He closed all banks, inspected them, and reopened only the stable ones. He created massive public employment programs. He legalized labor unions. He ended the gold standard. He introduced social protections and pensions. And most importantly, he launched enormous infrastructure projects. For the first time, Americans saw that the government could do more than govern. It could reshape the economy. Massive projects like the Golden Gate Bridge became symbols of the New Deal. Global impact. How the Great Depression led the world toward war. The crisis didn't just destroy the U.S. economy. It shattered global trade. Within 3 years, world trade fell by more than half. Countries closed their borders, raised tariffs, and adopted their own economic controls. In Germany, the crisis fueled the rise of radical parties. The Nazis exploited the nation's suffering, promising stability and order. Many historians argue that without the Great Depression, Hitler would never have gained such overwhelming support. When the Great Depression truly ended? Technically, the worst years were 1932-1933, but the United States didn't fully recover until World War II began. Military orders, mass mobilization, and explosive industrial growth revived the economy, reduced unemployment, and sparked a new economic boom. Thank you for watching. If you're interested in stories that change the way we see the past, subscribe and stay tuned. In upcoming videos, we'll look at which crises could repeat today and which lessons the world still hasn't learned from the Great Depression.